You can call me mathematics. I've been with humanity, well, forever it seems. A tool to build cities, to map the stars, but I wasn't always this complete. I had to grow, and my first real growth spurt came from a moment of pure terror. A crisis that started with something as simple as a line drawn on a piece of paper.
You see, in my early days, I had some very devoted followers, the Pythagoreans, and to them, I was perfect, divine even. They believed the entire universe, from the notes in a song to the paths of the planets, could be explained by simple, beautiful whole numbers and the ratios. They thought they had it all figured out.
And that's where the trouble started. Right there, inside their favorite shape, the simple, perfect square, a secret was hiding. A secret so powerful it was about to bring their whole worldview, their whole reality, crashing down around them.
To really get why this was such a big deal, you have to understand their world. For the Pythagoreans, every number was a ratio. The number 5? That's just 5/1. The perfect harmony in music? A 3:2 ratio. Geometry itself was just ratios you could see. It was all so neat, so tidy. No gaps, no weird exceptions. Or so they believed.
Okay, so now we get to the heart of it, the problem that kicked off my first real identity crisis. It all started with this one guy, Hippasus, a Pythagorean, just staring at a square. Something that should have been incredibly simple, but just wasn't adding up.
So here's the setup. They used their own master's big discovery, the Pythagorean theorem, and they figured out that if you have a square with sides that are 1 unit long, the diagonal's length when you square it has to be 2. So the length itself must be the square root of 2. Simple enough, right? All they had to do was find the fraction, the ratio that equals the square root of 2. They tried for weeks.
And look, they got so close. I mean, 7/5 is pretty good, and 577/408 is amazingly close. But here's the thing, close doesn't cut it in my world. There was always this tiny bit left over, a stubborn little imperfection, and this really horrifying thought started creeping into their minds. What if it wasn't just that they hadn't found the right fraction yet? What if there was no fraction at all?
This was it, the moment of truth. They had this one tool they trusted more than anything, pure, cold, hard logic. And in this really cruel twist, they used that very tool to prove the one thing their philosophy could not possibly survive.
Let's just walk through how this beautiful, terrible proof worked. It starts with a simple what if. What if the square root of 2 can be written as a fraction p/q in its simplest possible form? Well, if that's true, it means p has to be an even number. Okay, but if you follow that logic, it also means that q times also has to be an even number. And there it is. The trap snaps shut. If both p and q are even, the fraction was never in its simplest form to begin with. Their own assumption led to a flat-out contradiction. The only possible conclusion? The assumption was wrong from the start.
And just like that, a whole new type of number was dragged into existence, kicking and screaming. They called it irrational. Not because it was crazy, but in the most literal way possible. It was not a ratio. My own identity, my own nature, had just become infinitely more complicated than anyone ever dreamed.
This discovery wasn't just some interesting little puzzle. Oh no, it was a complete catastrophe. It tore a giant hole in everything they thought they knew about me and about the very fabric of the universe.
Think about the number line. They thought it was a solid, continuous thing made of all their nice, neat fractions. But suddenly, they realized it was more like Swiss cheese. It was full of holes. The rational numbers they loved so much were just tiny little islands in a vast, uncharted ocean of these new, irrational numbers. The square root of 3, the square root of 5, on, forever.
And this one discovery created a crisis on 4 different fronts. There was a mathematical crisis, their basic tools were broken, a philosophical one, if all is number is wrong, then is the universe just unknowable? A crisis for the Pythagorean Brotherhood, their whole reason for being was just debunked by their own methods, and a really practical one too. How do you even teach or work with a number you can't actually write down?
But this is what I love about humans. This is the beauty of it. When a door slams in your face, you find a window. And my followers, facing a crisis that could have been the end of me, saved me by changing how they saw me.
The pivot they made was just genius. They said, okay, fine. We can't write this quantity down as a fraction. But what if we stop thinking about it as a number and start thinking about it as a length?
You see, you couldn't write the square root of 2, but you could absolutely, perfectly draw it.
And just like that, the monster was tamed. These scary, impossible numbers became real, physical things. They were just lines you could make with a compass and a straight edge. You could see them, you could compare them, you could use them. The abstract horror became a concrete, workable tool.
Looking back on it all, that whole painful mess was the best thing that ever happened to me. It forced me to be more than just counting sheep and measuring fields. It forced me to grow up, to become more rigorous, more abstract, and way, way more powerful.
The legacy of that crisis shaped who I am today. It made it clear that pure proof, not just faith or belief, was the final word. It showed that my most basic ideas, like what a number even is, have to be able to change and expand. And it proved, once and for all, that a good crisis is the best way to spark innovation.
But there's one last, darker part of this story. What about poor Hippasus? What happens to the person who finds the uncomfortable truth nobody wants to hear?
Well, the legend, and we have to say it's just a legend, is that the other Pythagoreans took him out on a boat and drowned him, just to keep this terrible secret from getting out. It's a pretty chilling thought, isn't it? That finding the truth is one thing, but getting the world to accept it can be something else entirely.